Story 1. The night hide-and-seek turned real. I was 15 when it happened. A Friday night in late September, when the evenings were starting to get cold where I lived. My parents had gone out for dinner with some family friends and said they wouldn't be back until late. That meant I had the house all to myself. So I called my best friend and neighbor, Chris. We were the same age, lived right across the street, and spent most of our weekends together. Normally we'd chill in my basement playing games or watching movies, but that night, we got bored. Chris suddenly suggested we play hide and seek. I laughed at first, it sounded childish. But we had done it before with a few friends, and it had actually been fun. My house wasn't that big, but there were plenty of dark corners and hiding spots. We decided to turn most of the lights off to make it scarier. The only light we left on was in the kitchen. The rules were simple: no going outside, no attic, no crawl space. Everything else, bedrooms, basement, closets, was fair game. Chris wanted to hide first. I covered my eyes in the living room and started counting to 50. I could hear him running at first, then everything went quiet. When I finished, I shouted that I was coming. I started with the kitchen, not much to hide behind there. Checked behind the basement door, the hallway, the bathroom. Empty. The closet near the front door, nothing. I crept upstairs and the wooden floor creaked under me, echoing in the still air. My parents' room first, under the bed, behind the dresser. No Chris. Then my room, messy but still easy to check. Closet, desk, empty. That only left the guest room at the end of the hall. The door was slightly open. I pushed it slowly, waiting for him to jump out, but the room was dead silent. I stepped inside, scanned around. Looked under the bed. Nothing. Closet, empty. At that point, I figured he was in the basement. So I went back down. Checked behind the laundry machines, under the stairs, and finally, there he was, curled up behind a pile of boxes. Laughing, we joked about how long it took me to find him, then switched. Now it was my turn to hide. I went upstairs and slid under the guest bed, pulling the hanging sheet down to cover me completely. My heart thudded in my chest as I lay there in the dark. A few minutes later, I heard him coming upstairs. His footsteps were slow, steady. He checked the bathroom first, then my parents' room. I could hear the floor groaning under his weight as he moved closer. Then, silence. I held my breath when his steps stopped right next to the bed. I could hear him breathing. My chest burned from holding still. Then, the footsteps turned away. He walked out. I waited a few minutes, expecting him to call out that I'd won, but the house stayed too quiet. Finally, I crawled out. Downstairs, the couch was empty. I called his name. Then from the basement, I heard his voice. "I'm down here." I frowned. That didn't make sense. I had just heard him upstairs a few minutes ago. I walked to the basement door and shouted, "Game's over." He yelled back, "I'm still looking for you. Where are you hiding?" That's when my stomach dropped. "I'm in the kitchen," I said. A second later, I heard him running up the basement steps. When he appeared, he looked confused. "How did you get upstairs so fast?" he asked. I told him I'd been under the guest bed the whole time. His face went pale. He swore he'd checked that room and thought he heard someone breathing in there. We both brushed it off and laughed, but the air felt different after that. We played one more round, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Every creak in the floor made me jump. At one point, I heard a soft thud upstairs, but when I went to look, The rooms were empty. We eventually gave up and sat on the couch watching TV. That's when it happened. A loud thump came from upstairs, like something heavy hitting the floor. Chris looked at me and whispered, "Your parents?" I reminded him they weren't home yet. The hairs on my arms stood up. We sat frozen, listening. Then we heard it again. Creak. Creak. Footsteps. Slow, dragging footsteps in the hallway upstairs. Neither of us moved. I whispered, "We should check." Chris shook his head, eyes wide. "No way." But if someone had broken in, we couldn't just sit there. I grabbed the fireplace poker and started up the stairs with Chris right behind me. The house was deathly quiet, except for the floor groaning under our weight. At the top, I saw it. The guest room door was now fully closed. I knew I'd left it open. From behind the door came a soft sound, a dragging noise, like fabric sliding across the carpet. Chris whispered, "Let's just go." But I couldn't. My curiosity, or maybe my stupidity, kept me there. I reached for the knob, handshaking, and pushed the door open fast. The room was empty. Completely still, closet door slightly open. I moved closer, pulled it wide. Nothing but boxes and coats. We laughed nervously, pretending we weren't scared. But then bang! A door downstairs slammed shut. We froze. Then came the sound of the front door opening and closing. Someone was in the house. We bolted down the hallway, locked ourselves in my room, lights off, barely breathing. I clutched the poker tight. We listened. Faint footsteps echoed from below, moving through the living room. Then the basement door creaked open, and the steps went down. That's when we ran, down the stairs, out the back door, across the yard to Chris's house. His parents called the police. When the officers searched my place, they found nothing. No signs of a break-in. No footprints. No damage. They told us it was probably our imagination, but we both knew what we heard. For weeks, I couldn't sleep without checking under my bed and behind my closet door. We never played hide and seek again, and even now, years later, every time I hear the floor creak in the dark, I still think about that night. The sound of footsteps above me, the guest room door closing on its own, and the worst part, whoever was in that house with us never made a sound when they left. Story 2. The woods behind my house. There was a small patch of woods behind my childhood home. Nothing too big, just a thin line of trees that separated our backyard from the old train tracks. But for some reason, even as a kid, those woods always felt wrong. No birds ever chirped there. No squirrels. No rustling leaves unless the wind forced them to move. My parents always told me, "Don't go past the fence, it's unsafe." I thought they meant the train tracks, but later I realized it was the woods they were warning me about. When I turned 12, curiosity got the better of me. I climbed the fence one evening just before sunset. The moment I landed on the other side, the air felt heavy, like I had stepped into a different world. I could swear I heard faint whispering, like voices hiding between the trees. I told my best friend about it the next day. He laughed, said I was just imagining things. So we went together that weekend with flashlights. At first, it was quiet. Then, about 50 steps in, we found it. A small clearing with something strange in the middle, a wooden door, lying flat on the ground, like the entrance to a cellar. Except there were no houses anywhere near there. The handle was rusted, but it moved when I pulled. The smell that came out was something I'll never forget. Damp earth, rotting wood, and something else. Something dead. Before we could look closer, we heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Crunching leaves behind us. We turned our lights toward the sound, but no one was there. Then we heard the door slam shut on its own. We ran like hell. I didn't sleep that night. And when we went back the next day to prove it to ourselves, the door was gone. Just a patch of freshly dug soil where it had been years later after we'd moved away. I read an article about the area. Apparently, an old farmhouse once stood there in the 1950s. The owner vanished without a trace. Police searched everywhere except the woods. They said the land was unstable. But I know the truth. The ground wasn't unstable. It was hungry. Story 3: The Whispering Hotel Room, a true nightmare. I travel a lot for work, mostly late-night check-ins at cheap motels, long drives and lonely rooms. But there's one night I can't ever forget. Last year, I stayed at a place called the Wayfield Inn. It looked ordinary, faded sign, buzzing neon lights, the smell of old carpet. But the woman at the front desk was strange. When I asked for a room, she paused and said, "Just avoid room 103. It's under maintenance." Then she gave me the key for 105. I laughed to myself. Every horror story starts like that, right? A forbidden room. But later that night, around 2 a.m., I woke up to something faint. A whisper dot. It wasn't coming from the TV or the hallway. It was coming from the vent, the one between my room and the next dot. At first, it sounded like soft breathing. Then, words began to form. "I'm still here." I froze. I thought maybe someone was in room 103, but the woman had said it was empty. So, like an idiot, I whispered back, "Who's there?" There was a pause. Then the voice answered, quiet, trembling, "Don't let him in." Suddenly, I heard knocking. Not from the door, but from inside the wall behind the bed. 3 slow knocks. Then silence. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and checked the peephole. Nothing. When I turned back, I noticed something new. Deep scratches on the wallpaper near the vent. Like someone had clawed at it trying to escape. That was it for me. I packed up, got in my car, and drove off. As I left, I looked up and saw room 103's light flicker on for just a second. The curtains moved, like someone was standing there, watching me leave. The next morning, I called the motel out of curiosity. But the woman at the desk said something that still makes my skin crawl. "Sir, the Wayfield Inn closed last year, after that man in room 103 killed himself. The building's been empty ever since. I don't know who or what I spoke to that night, but I still hear that whisper sometimes. Don't let him in." You just heard one of the untold scary truths. But remember, every whisper, every shadow, every chill down your spine might not be just your imagination. Subscribe before the next night falls.